So the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning, tells the story of a group of youngsters driving down the back roads of Texas, and this is exactly the same plot as most of the other movies. Scratch all that shit. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning, tells the origin stories of Leatherface and the Hewitt family. That sounds a little bit better. So for those of you that have seen my review of the 2003 remake, spoiler alert if you haven't, I love the hell out of that movie. I think it's a damn good horror movie. One of the best remakes to ever come out, and one of my favorite, possibly my favorite, you'll find out when I do my ranking video, of this entire franchise. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning, is the prequel chapter to that 2003 remake. And from what it seems to me, at least from the feedback I've gotten on my comment section, from people requesting this review, anticipating this review, that those that actually like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning, seem to be the most passionate about this installment than any other film in the Texas Chainsaw franchise. Very interesting to me. And it also made me watch this movie with a total anticipation that I didn't really have for most of the other movies that I had to watch in here, because I've seen this movie before, but I don't remember liking it very much. But people are such passionate fans about this chapter that whenever I pressed the play button getting ready for this review to watch this movie, I was ready to have my mind changed. I was ready to see what everybody else saw. I was ready to declare a new favorite installment in this franchise. But I'll tell you right now, it didn't quite get there for me. I do enjoy this movie. I do have a lot of pros for it, but there's some things that really bug me about it, and I'm going to tell you about that right now, starting with the positives of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning. First and foremost, I really appreciate, as a fan of that 2003 remake, that they kept a lot of the tone, the look, and the feel of that remake for this prequel chapter. Marcus Nispel, the director of that 2003 remake, did not return for this, but they did pretty damn good about recreating a lot of the things that he did, a lot of things that Daniel Pearl did, and I appreciate that, because it really, not only is it good because I'm a fan of that remake and I like that tone, but it's a good segue if you watch this movie into that 2003 remake. They mesh together really well. It's not a jarring change. Also, as a fan of that remake, can't help but love all the returning cast of that movie, especially R. Lee Ermey, who is my favorite character and the scariest, most sinister character, in my opinion, of this entire Texas Chainsaw world.
You kids okay?
Leatherface, once again played by Andrew Bernarski, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, but fuck it, the big, gigantic, scary motherfucker that plays Leatherface. He's back once again, does just as good of a job as he did in that movie, possibly even better because he gets a lot more to do in this one. And really just the return of the entire Hewitt family not only adds to the purpose of this movie and reinforces a lot of the storyline of that 2003 remake, but it's a really welcome return because it just expands and fleshes out the lore of this family and how everybody's interconnected, because you didn't get too much of that in the remake. You honestly just kind of slowly learn that these people are all interconnected because they're a family. In this one, you find out from the get-go, you figure out who's who, who's related to who, what their job is in this family, what their role is in this mass murdering little adventure that they got going on here in the Hewitt house. And I enjoy seeing that family once again. They're one of the best parts of the remake, and they make this movie because the movie is basically centered around them this time around. And most of the characters in this prequel are pretty decent. There's not really any standout characters or standout stars like I thought Jessica Biel or especially Jonathan Tucker was in the previous movie, but there's some really serviceable acting. There's some decent storylines going on, little plot lines going on between these characters, like the two brothers. One of them is gung-ho military, the other one's trying to burn his draft card and dodge the draft. Pretty interesting little setup there, and it does give you enough of a subplot to not detract from the movie, but at the same time gives you enough to kind of latch onto these characters and get an idea who they are. So for the most part, I think that our main protagonists of this movie were pretty effective. Something that I thought was pretty interesting that they kind of shy away from in that remake is the cannibalistic side of this family. They triple down on that in this movie. They go right into the cannibal storyline. They tell you why they're eating people. They make it the main drive of why they're kidnapping people and torturing people and cutting them all up. It's all for food. And it even has a cool little backstory with Sheriff Hewitt and his character, which is great because I love his character, involving him having to cannibalize people to survive as a POW back when he was in the war.
Now, let's give thanks for the bounty that's been given us. Bow your heads. I was hungry and he gave me meat. I was thirsty and he gave me drink.
Not only is that a pretty realistic explanation for why Sheriff Hewitt and in turn his family starts to do these things, but it's one of those answers that an origin story tells that luckily for me does not detract from the effect of the later movies. Because one of the problems I have with origin stories is a lot of the questions that movies leave unanswered, I prefer them unanswered. That's a question they answer that I actually like their answer to it. And aside from the cannibalistic stuff, if you're in for gore and carnage candy and tons of fucking body parts flying everywhere, that gets ramped way the fuck up in Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. There's a decent amount of gore and some sinister images and some good practical effects in that remake, but they go for broke in The Beginning. You get to see flesh peeled from people's faces. You get to see people getting slaughtered left and right with the chainsaw, which if you are a really big gore hound, that's an element of that remake you probably got a little bit underwhelmed by. They make up for it in The Beginning, because holy shit, this might be the most gory installment in this franchise. It's got some stiff competition from the movies later on past this one, but this is definitely up there. And all in all, probably my biggest positive of this movie is kind of a point that I was already hinting on earlier, but I'll go ahead and reinforce it here. I'm not a fan of origin stories at all for the most part, but this is one of the few origin stories to me that really is harmless. You could watch this movie, enjoy it for the answers that they give, whether or not you like those answers or not. They don't take away anything from the movie that comes after it, and that is good, because there's so many prequels out there that if you decide to buy into the canon that they put in front of you with this prequel, some of it just clouds some of the effect of the later films, and it answers questions that should have been left unanswered, or it gives answers that you can make a better answer for in your mind. I can't say any of that for The Beginning. Most of the answers that they give are answers that I probably could have came up with, but the answers that they give do not cloud the 2003 remake for me at all, and that is a huge positive for me as somebody who hates origin stories. But with that being said, sliding into my negatives of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, I feel like all of the questions that they made this movie to answer for the fans are pretty much all questions that nobody was asking. How did Sheriff Hoyt lose his teeth? They tell you in this movie. I didn't really care, but they tell you. How did the uncle lose his legs? They tell you here. I didn't care, but they tell you. All these little tiny, minute details that directly go into the 2003 remake as far as the timeline goes, but they're answers that I didn't really need. Nobody was asking these questions. At least I wasn't. Were you? They do give you a few interesting answers that maybe you didn't come up with in your imagination, like the fact that Sheriff Hoyt's not even actually a sheriff. He just murdered the sheriff and took his identity, or how Leatherface actually got his first kill, how he actually got his leather face and started skinning people. All of that is pretty interesting, but most of this movie is hammered down on small, minute details that was left unanswered in that remake that just to me seem like a waste of time to make an entire movie to answer those questions. Also, despite the fact that it does make this installment stand on its own amongst the franchise, that the gore and the carnage candy is up so much, I don't necessarily feel like it was necessary. I thought that it was just as effective in the 2003 remake to not show a lot of stuff and to leave a lot of stuff in your mind. Yes, it's cliche, but it's cliche for a reason, because most of the time it's true. What you don't see is often scarier than the stuff that they do show you. And because they show so much gore, they show everything, they leave nothing to your imagination, not only do I feel like it's a little bit unnecessary, but it doesn't make this movie scary or tense or intriguing on the level that that 2003 remake was. And it doesn't really help the fact that the storyline and the plot of this prequel is basically the same plot that we've had in every single Texas Chainsaw movie since the original. You got people driving across the Texas outback, they fucking fall into this shitty little town for some reason, and they become victims of the Hewitt family or the Sawyer family. We've seen it before, wash, rinse, repeat. They don't really do anything different with that setup.
This is your lucky day. Now what happens if you kids drive all the way up to Austin just to find out that you don't even qualify to be in the Army? I'm concerned about your physical fitness here. Now, doesn't that make you feel special?
And unfortunately, the directing talent behind this movie wasn't quite on the level that it was with Marcus Nispel to bring a simple plot like that to life on screen, give it a lot of flair, a lot of style. This time it was directed by Jonathan Liebsman, who I've always called the Dollar Store Michael Bay. This is the guy that brought you Wrath of the Titans, Battle Los Angeles, the Ninja Turtles remake, not the shiniest of resumes. And even though they nailed a lot of the tone, a lot of the look, and some of the style of the movie that they're trying to lead into with this prequel, I also really missed the score. They didn't really borrow that score that was so great about that remake and use it effectively in this movie. It's in a few spots, but it's not throughout the movie. It's not used quite as effectively. It doesn't really enhance the movie like it should. It just felt like it was kind of tacked in here and there. So you could really use a good score in a movie like this to ramp up some of the emotions you're going for. I don't feel like they did that with this one. And my final negative for this movie is that although I do like kind of the quicker runtime and the quicker pace of this movie, it kind of makes the story feel rushed. Automatically, the Hewitt family is starting to kill people and cannibalize people. Then our plot gets going. The main characters, the main protagonists are involved. You get all the way through, people start dying, and the movie ends, and it just feels like they went from slightly deranged people to full-on cannibals and murderers, and this whole plot takes place within like less than a day. Even though it probably doesn't, it just feels that way. And so even though it's a really easy, digestible watch to just go through less than 90 minutes of a Texas Chainsaw movie, it just feels rushed to me. It feels like they could have fleshed out the story a little bit more.
You guys fuck all your cousins or just the ones you find attractive?
You blasphemous bitch! This is redemption, lady. That's what this is.
But all in all, guys, I do enjoy this movie. I don't enjoy it nearly as much as some of the people in my YouTube comment section seem to be. So people love the hell out of this movie, but I do think that it's among the better of this franchise. It's certainly not among the worst, like not even fucking close to the worst of this franchise, but pretty good prequel, pretty serviceable story, pretty serviceable characters, a lot of gore, some interesting answers given, some not so interesting answers given. Could have done a lot better, I think, if they got Marcus and the Spell back. This probably would have been a classic right alongside that 2003 remake, but overall, pretty enjoyable prequel for the most part. So if you enjoyed the 2003 remake and you want to see how all these characters came to be, or just watch another movie where all these actors come back to portray these awesome characters, look no further than Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. It's already on Netflix, so absolutely check it out right now on Netflix. So what do you guys think of Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning? Are you like me and just think it's a pretty decent, serviceable prequel, or are you like a lot of the people that I've been talking with lately that think this is among the best horror movies of all time, among the best of this franchise, and just really a movie that is criminally underrated? It's a classic. What side of that scale do you fall on? Let me know down in the comment section below, guys, and we'll talk about it. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. If you want to check out my social media links, I've got Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter down in the comment section. The video description below. If you click that little arrow, it'll drop down, you get all those beautiful links, as well as the link to my Patreon page, which is a great way to give back to this channel, a good way to support it, help it grow, but also get exclusive content for patron eyes only. And if you don't want to become a patron, totally cool. This is always free on YouTube for you to enjoy. So check that out if you want, guys. And if you want to check out some of my other videos, as always, you can check them out by clicking right over here.